Welcome back. Happy New Year. Wing It Podcast, goosedigital.com. Who do we have?
Chris O'Neill.
Kevin Butler.
Mike Warren.
Mike Warren. Thank you for joining us.
Welcome.
First guest of 2019.
I'm the new guy.
Yeah, the new guy. This means a lot. So Michael, what are we doing here?
Yeah, we'll have to pick that, don't we? I'll go Michael. You go Mike. How's that?
Okay, fine.
All
So
right.
Michael's from COMDA.com, and we're going to let him talk about the background there. But one of Goose's more prestige customers and a very important account. So we're thrilled to have him on the scene. And the first guest of 2019.
Yeah, and a long-term one, too. I think year 4?
Yeah,
three.
I think we're going to three.
Yeah.
We're going to 3. So, yeah, well, Michael, I'll turn it over to you to give your intro here.
Wow. All right, let me do that. COMDA. COMDA is a promotional products company. It's kind of a buzz term that if you're not in the industry, you probably have no idea what that means. But what we sell are products that have logos, company names on them, that these businesses then give out to their customers as gifts, generally speaking. Sometimes they sell them, but more often than not, they give them away as thank yous to their customers, reminders, ways of making their customers feel important, and obviously getting their company name, logo, phone number, things like that out into their marketplace where they hopefully get a return on investment from that value, that advertising avenue.
Yeah.
And, it's evolved a lot over the 45 years we've been in that business. The product mix has changed a lot over the years, but a lot of them are still staples, T-shirts, baseball hats, pens, calendars, all those coffee mugs, things that you traditionally think of as promotional products. They're still very much the staples of that industry.
Hey, marketing guys here. So we support the notion of branding and
There you go.
lead generation tools and tactics.
Yeah, I mean, we love that stuff. We've been buying a lot of it from COMDA, and we certainly see the value in having our logo attached to these things and handing them out in a variety of different ways. And those of you that don't know, you've been with the company for basically since the beginning. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that and your role?
Sure. It is a family business, but actually my father started it back in the early 70s. And, I've sort of obviously been involved in it really from day one. As a kid, I can remember packing boxes and, doing things like that on weekends. And I still feel like I'm owed money for that. But anyway, family business has those things in it.
Yeah.
Grew up through the business, which I think is a good thing from the perspective that, I understand all the different elements of the business. I understand the sales process. I've, done the actual on the phone selling, and then, I've taught salespeople, built out sales teams myself, got into the marketing elements. More recently, started to get more involved or have a clearer understanding of the business workings and such. Went back to school, honed my knowledge on that kind of element of it, and now largely run the place with my brothers. So
It's awesome. It's an amazing story, and it's one that I think we hear a few of, right? The types of customers that we tend to go after. Customers that have great businesses, and a lot of those tend to be family-run companies that are making the transition to digital and transforming their operations, and probably, I can imagine over the 45 years had to transform the operations many times, to evolve with the times and B, the growing business. That's one of the things we wanted to sort of talk about right now was, we see COMDA as an example of a prime a transformative organization that is looking at the last X number of years and the success that we've had running a business, and now changing with the times. And those times are different now. And so basically, I'd like to maybe turn it over to Chris to say, what are you seeing on the front lines? Chris, you're having conversations daily.
Right. So the things that, back in the 70s and 80s, the way that that customers were contacted or prospects were contacted, a much different scene than what we're seeing today. One of the things about family-run businesses is oftentimes, the patriarch or the matriarch have, very entrenched sort of ideas about how it is that new customers are acquired, how existing customers are marketed to. And one of the things that I'm sure you have experienced, since the business has been around for like those 50 years,
Almost.
is, those multiple transformations. I mean, it hasn't just been over the last 5 years, guys. It's been like there's been a few changes over the course of the, between the late 70s through to 2000s. There was big changes in the way that people were contacted and the way that that businesses were managed from a sales and marketing standpoint. Love to hear from you in terms of what that's been like, sort of to sort of go into the odds in the 2010s with the understanding that, listen, our customers are behaving differently. Our employees are looking for different things.
I can absolutely tell you a lot of those things, having witnessed them firsthand, because you're right, over 40 years, it's remarkable how, some of those things that were core marketing beliefs have been turned on their head, and they just don't work the way they once did. We initially was a direct mail company. I mean, I can tell you we had maybe half a dozen employees total. You didn't need any more than that. You needed, you send out a lot of mail, and there were catalogs and order forms and all kinds of things like that. And then you waited around for the mailman to bring back your business for you. And then it was fulfillment, and you were done. There was very little, customer contact directly. That changed. I can't say exactly when, but I do know that telemarketing was sort of the next phase of customer contact.
Telemarketing.
Yes.
Telemarketing.
It was not such a bad thing early on. It has been. It got co-opted somewhere along the way, and unfortunately that happens. But there was a time when our business and many others relied on telemarketing. It was the way to reach your customers and have conversations and actually interact with them, as opposed to sending them something static and hoping they responded to it, which was direct mail.
Well, people were answering the phone back then.
I was just going to say, one of the big game changers, honestly, is, and this is probably in the last 4 or 5 years, people just don't answer their phone anymore. And I know I'm guilty of it as anybody. I just, I with the advent of call screening and all that stuff, you don't just flat out pick up the phone every time it rings anymore.
It's like a special occasion now, actually.
It's kind of true.
Really? Like, you're like, oh, I'm going to have a phone call.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. How much time is this going to take?
Because it'll take longer to text, but I'm willing to do that.
Yeah, exactly. It would. Yeah.
It is remarkable how our mindsets change that way. But I think that was probably the most recent, eye-opening game changer, was that wow, telemarketing is a problem now. It's not a solution. It's part of the problem, and that was coupled with the digital world change, that sea change of digital communication, that really was the thing that everybody, if you were quick on the nascent curve, you jumped ahead, and there are companies in our industry that were. And they're the big players now. They're the dominant players.
Would it be fair to say that because the telemarketing transformation, if you will, was something a little more easily understood, because you basically could throw more physical resources at it? You could basically say, okay, I want to drive more business, so therefore I need to get more people on the phone. And if that was maybe an easier thing or transformation to understand than that which is the digital transformation, where it's not exactly the same thing.
A lot more variables in the digital transitions than just cutting over to, say, a telemarketing-led program.
Yeah, listen, it's not just a straight volume play. As you said, just if I need more sales, I'll just hire more salespeople, and as long as they're reasonably economically viable, each one, then the more I have, the more money the more revenue I'll drive. It was great, and then it wasn't. And the problem is, digital isn't the same equation. It's you can't define it the same way.
Yeah, and I think, one of the challenges that companies who are starting their digital journey off is that oftentimes they don't have the knowledge themselves or internal capabilities to test out their value proposition online. And in many cases, they don't have that value proposition clearly articulated to themselves internally. Salesperson on the phone, maybe a print, you're sort of relying on, well, whatever, the salesperson could be way more dynamic than a catalog. Catalog's going to catch somebody's interest or not. Well, if I've got you on the phone, I can help, be dynamic and evolve that value proposition. But now you're saying, well, let's put an ad on Instagram. Let's put something in front of a prospective client. What is that going to look like? Yeah, you can target people. You can put an ad in front of that's easy to do. But who and what are they going to say? And I think that's part of what makes digital challenging is you don't know what levers yet that you can really pull and say, oh yeah, well, we know that type of ad to a trade show company that talks about price in Canada, and there's 10,000 customers out there, just run another one of those and spend 100K on it because we know what it's going to do. Whereas with people, you can just, well, we know, one person can do X number of orders if we give them X number of accounts, and you know what levers to pull, right?
I think we're starting to get there slowly, but the conversation is now changing. What I would say, like finally, but this idea of some of these things are becoming a bit more normal in our sort of day-to-day marketing practices, whereas it's not just about can we target, I don't know, a region or a certain age group, depending on what, I don't know, the platform is, Facebook, Instagram, something else. So I think now we're asking the questions, well, what will we put in front of them? Recognizing that there's a level of baseline knowledge going in across a lot of businesses saying, okay, these are the things we could do. And then someone smart's asking the question, well, what would that look like? Can we be very personalized in certain areas, right?
Right.
But we've still got a ways to go, but at least now we've been doing some of these things for 5, 6, maybe 8 years in some cases. And so now it's about trying to get beyond the first ground level foundation of digital marketing.
When would you say, and I want to jump, because we're kind of jumping to number 3, but I want to get to number 2, but just because you mentioned we're doing this for 6 to 8 years now, when would you say content marketing was a thing? Like
when did it start?
When did it start?
Good question.
Was it like 08? Like what would be the, when would they?
I don't think that. I don't know. I think
early?
we've been sort of in content marketing for probably about 5 to 6 years now.
5 to 6 years now?
I think in terms of a prominent message or even, our background's digital commerce and e-com or just commerce now. But I think people were talking about content and commerce probably about 5, 6 years ago when you really needed to have a story and a message around what you're offering rather than just jamming a sale or something down someone's throat. There had to be context and relevance around it.
Well, the reason why I bring that up is because what you were saying, not knowing which levers to pull or how to have consistent new customer acquisition or existing customer growth on digital. There's been, we all know snake oil, right? Like you're selling snake oil. That concept that over the last, say, 10 years, let's just say maybe 10 years, that things are moving so fast. An SEO thing comes out and then everybody rushes to the bandwagon, and then a content marketing thing, which now we're seeing actually a shift kind of away from pure content marketing is that's going to be the be all end all to, and that was the next snake oil. And that a lot of businesses would buy into that. And I think to your point, if you could get on early enough and establish a way to acquire customers and you really had a good value proposition and you're willing to go through that process, you'd probably be a lot, you could see how these digital players have grown. But for, even in your business, there's one, we could probably count on 2 hands people that have achieved a solid level of scale digitally.
I'm not sure it's even 2 hands.
It may not even be 2 hands, right? So really, when we're looking at it, is that I think there's this. I believe we're getting to a place now in digital where some of these theories are, you can kind of step back and say, yes, we already know what that is. We don't have to rush into the next PPC wave. We don't have to rush into let's actually be more strategic and think about our customer and think about our own messaging and slowly move into these things in a way that makes sense for us.
A level of digital maturity.
A level of digital maturity.
Intelligent adoption, I guess,
Yes.
not just rushing to the next cool thing.
Yeah.
Which is a challenge in a developing industry like digital. You always want to be the next quick thing, the next big thing, because you don't want to be behind the curve.
You don't want to miss an opportunity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
On the other hand, baseline measurement is such a critical thing, particularly in marketing. You have to have some sort of, what am I comparing that to, and what am I, is it accomplishing what I wanted it to accomplish, and can I measure that against something else? Each time you try something new, you have to have something you're going to measure that against in order to have some sort of baseline to say, yes, this was a good idea, a bad idea, or something we should abandon.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't we talk a little bit about what is COMDA focused on today, in terms of getting into this new world? What are some of the things when you think of, leading this company into the future? What are the kind of immediate, now digital we're going to get into, but just, kind of bigger picture.
That's a big question. Here's my sort of take on it. I look at the other companies in our industry, some of the really big players, and they don't do anything that my company doesn't do just as well or better. And so I look at that and I say, the challenge here is not to improve what I do. It's to improve, how do I get that message to more people? How do I make that more widely known? And that's where you start to look at things like, what are my touch points? How can I reach customers? How can I talk to customers? And there's a lot of different ways you have to be able to do that now. You can't just pick up the phone and call them all. You can't just send catalogs out in the mail. Lots of people throw out their junk mail. They don't even look at it. We already talked about people don't answer the phone. And not everybody's online. Not everybody's
or
digitally
not
savvy.
In the same place.
Yeah.
Some people are on Facebook. Some people are on Instagram. It's not always the same. Right?
Exactly. And so understanding how many different ways there are to reach people, how do you maximize that? How do you do it in a way that's not just sales? I think people are tired of being hard sold things.
Yes.
And
in a way that's scalable. I think, when you look at a lot of the digital work that we've started to do together, it's been to get to a scale, whether it's X number of videos that can be produced, where you're not just doing onesie, twosie little things. You're actually saying, well, okay, well, if that works, we have to do 100 of them. Or, we have to be able to, like a mailer where you can flip a switch and go to 1 million people. It's a little bit more complex than that in digital, but it still has to have that needs to be in the back of everyone's mind to say, well, how is this going to scale?
Yeah.
How can we push it out there in a scalable way?
Yes. We've had that conversation, you and I, a number of times. That worked for a little bit. How do we make that work on a much broader scale? Yeah.
It's interesting you say the concept of like getting it out there, and that your business isn't dramatically different than the next business, and it's a really great point. And I think that I know this painting here. Interesting story now that's being told behind this painting. So, and I'll throw a bone out to Iconic, who is where I bought that painting from, and a few around the office. So it was early 2017, and what we had was they targeted me on Instagram, and it was a Shopify site, and I bought a couple of these paintings. To be honest with you, I didn't know much about these paintings. I didn't know if they were just somebody bought a boatload of them in China, and they found an interesting way to reach me on Instagram, and you know what, why not? It sort of made sense, and I bought them. Turns out the backstory is extremely interesting with this company. And I don't even know if it's interesting, or is it just the fact that we can know a backstory, and most of the time you can't know the backstory.
Or
so
as a consumer, you have an interest in that backstory.
I just think it differentiates them. So now they've started a podcast, and you hear the founders, and what you learn is that actually one of the two is a great artist. One of them has more of a business acumen, failed a number of years trying to get this going. And maybe the average person buying isn't going to appreciate all of that. But then I also saw their production facility, and I saw reams of this canvas flying off of big rolls being printed. And all of a sudden, like, if you don't have that, if you are the guy that's buying a bunch, and I'm picking out China, but I'm going to, if you're buying a bunch of these and all you're doing is schlepping them on Instagram, you don't have a differentiated story. There is no story to tell other than the fact that that's the product that you have, and you're putting it on there and you hope the price is right. Whereas this, all of a sudden you see their factory and the guy, what's going on, and boom. And that's where I think, to your point of telling a better story and being able to say, well, maybe we're doing it just as well, or maybe even a bit better. But look at COMDA; it's been around for a long time. You can trust us. If we're a new customer coming to us, maybe there's a little bit more of a reason to go with us than the small web guy that's just setting up a shop.
Like relatability is a huge thing that never existed before.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that was just a non-phrase. Whether you could relate to the company you did business with was almost immaterial, and now it's a huge thing. I think it drives a lot of consumer decision making.
We were talking about this prior to starting the podcast. We were talking about phones and stuff like that. There's a reason why Apple can charge 30, 40, 50% more and still get away with it. I think the ways people buy things, whether it's on the B2B world or the B2C side of things, is I think people want to feel good about who they're buying from, why are they doing it, and that's a big part of it. It's not just a price situation anymore, and it hasn't been for a while. And to your point, it's not even about a quality of product if you feel like, relatively speaking, you and your competitors are more or less delivering the same level of quality product. Or there's not a product that they're offering you can't either, or whatever.
There's there is a few big trends that are, and I think it ties a little bit into the younger generation that we're seeing coming into, for right or wrong. And maybe this is more of a first world problem, but you see this emotional intelligence or this EQ leadership, if you've heard of any of these concepts, and the whole concept behind it is that the staff want to feel like they're adding value. They want to be part of something, right?
that quote matters.
Right. Whereas just shut up and do your job. You should be lucky to have one. That was kind of I was sort of on the cusp of that even, right? And certainly generations prior was much more of that. We were just lucky to have a job and pay our bills, right? So I think that where that sort of plays even into internal, we've talked to some clients that have straight up come to us and said, this digital initiative is as much of our ability to attract talent and our own staff feeling good about where they work because they're on social, because they're seeing all this stuff occur, than it is also about helping us grow the business. What do you think about that?
Oh, listen, I think that having I hate to use the phrase true believers, but people who are immersed in the world and understand and believe in it themselves, and then also feel like they're aligned with a company that has progressive thoughts and is equally aligned.
Well, I totally agree. Their employer is a representation of who they are as people, the qualities that they believe in, the things that they're doing, and it's a big part of an individual's identity. Because they talk about this with their friends on Friday night, Saturday night. Oh, what do you do for a living?
Exactly.
They've got to feel good about, well, I do this, this, and this.
But I think this is a new trend.
Well, the part that isn't new is that COMDA has basically reinvented itself many times. It's like a perpetual reinventing. All the time. A company that's been in business for 40 years has reinvented itself, responding to what the customers and the employees need to have, and that's an ongoing thing. I'm curious about somebody like yourself, Michael, that was able to kind of get that thing started, because it probably was not a 2 or 3 conversation kind of sail upward. I mean, we've got entrenched ideas and values about how it is that things are done. And you went in and you said something that kind of got the digital ball rolling. And it probably wasn't, we're going to be able to generate X, Y, Z out of this investment over the first year. So I'm just asking you, how do you get that conversation going?
That's a good question.
It is a good question. And I will tell you categorically from a family business perspective, where, as you say, there's that generational pass down that, I will quote my father word for word when he said, I can count on one hand the number of customers that'll ever order anything online from us. I was like,
that's awesome.
I was like, really? I mean, have you looked at some of our competitors? I mean, there are companies out there doing a lot of money in e-commerce revenue, and I'm not sure that our customers are any different from theirs. But so, some of it's breaking down, preconceived walls and notions and things like that. But, some of it's internal. You have to, at some point, look out at the world yourself and say, our insular way of thinking, has been successful, but at some point you reach that point where if you don't look outside of your own company at what's going on around it, then these things pass you by, and it's too late to catch up sometimes. There are a lot of venerable businesses out there that did not survive and have not survived. These are 100-year-old companies,
right,
that failed to catch the wave of what was happening and died a horrible death. It's easy to let that happen, and so you have to have that internal thing that says, I don't know everything, and I'm gonna bring in some other people that hopefully can help me bridge some of those gaps and accept that there are new directions and new ideas that you don't know everything there is to know about. I mean, if you want to sit around and have a conversation about direct mail or telemarketing, I can probably talk a lot about that and have pretty clear and concise opinions and ideas that are difficult to challenge. But if you want to talk about digital marketing and e-commerce, I'm not going to be the smartest guy in the room. So I need some other people in the room that are smarter and do have the expertise and the understanding to say, here's I guess it's me that has to say, here's where I want to get to, and then these other people have to say, okay, here are some of the things we need to bring to the table and start doing if we're going to get there.
So you're sort of you're willing to take that leap of faith, right? It's a reflection of your personality and sort of how you view the business. Can you talk a bit about that conversation internally with your father probably being less so on the leap of faith side and saying, well, like, what does this give me? Like, I have to feel good and have like a confidence behind what all this investment and transition is going to lead to. Because I think a lot of people we talk to are in that same boat where then there's always like a small percentage of people who are hardcore believers and they're just willing to do it. And that's an easy conversation. Great. How do we do that? And what does that look like? But for everyone else who's kind of, I sort of get it, I sort of don't, but where does this go? They can't often get in front of that.
I think the hardest part is that there is no A to B direct ROI sort of thing where you can say, we'll spend this and it'll generate that and you can't miss. First of all, there are very few of those in business anyway, but there are lots of people who believe that it's true, that especially if you have sort of defined methodologies that you've used for a long time.
Sure.
Like the telemarketing thing. I know if I just hire 10 more people, my sales will go up by whatever that 10 is relative to what I was before. If I had 100, now I have 110, and I'll get a 10% increase. That you can't necessarily make that direct connection. So it is a leap of faith. And again, credit to my father, who's sort of said, okay, listen, I don't understand it, but if you guys believe that it's a thing we need to do, then I'm willing to let you guys roll those dice and let's sort of see how it plays out for a while and keep me informed on how it's going, what you're doing and what we're getting out of it.
Yeah.
But, I don't know enough about it to lead it, so you guys are going to have to lead it. And I think that was a leap of faith on his part. Interestingly, he's sort of, the worm has really turned on that. We had our year-end Christmas lunch function, and his big thing was, we're going to unveil the new branding. We're COMDA.com now. We're no longer, we've gone to, COMDA has always been a constant, but it's sort of changed over the years as to what the sort of tag on to COMDA has been. And he said, no, COMDA.com. We're COMDA.com now, and we're going to have a big banner, and we're going to, I said, wow, really? Who are you?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's, but I think the point was that it was a leap of faith. It is a leap of faith. It still is. There are many times we talk in our meetings and say, okay, how are we going to pull this off? What's that going to look like? What's that going to cost? How are we going to measure the success of it?
Yeah.
And these are still ongoing because it's not linear.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think what we like to talk a lot about is, and I guess the closest analogy that I would use for listeners that have maybe a traditional marketing team that could be doing print, or even a sales function. Sales is a little bit different because I think when you build your sales team out, you're really directly building that team out around the volume of business that they can go do, and if one doesn't perform, you make those changes. But for a marketing team, outside the bigger cost of sale that you would roll up in terms of the business reporting, largely your measurement of success is the cost of deploying that mailer. So our cost of the printing and the postage, and okay, we went after X number of them, that was $1 million and it brought us this business, right? And we call that program spend. So close analogy on the digital side, pure PPC dollars spent. Well, if you didn't have a print marketing department, if you didn't have somebody to build the catalog in the first place and iterate it a million times, and if you didn't have people building this and building that, and there's a 5-person team there, you would have no print mailer, right? So that sunk cost. So we like to talk about, we actually will get, and we are getting there now, is to be able to say, well, yeah, you know what? We spent $100,000 on pay-per-click. What did that return? And that's, yeah, you could take a portion of the services or the head count if you needed to sort of justify that. But certainly as you start to spend those program dollars in digital in a bigger, ever increasing way, that's where we'll get to sort of being able to say, yeah, if we were to spend $1 million on digital, okay, and we already know that in this product line on that channel, we should expect roughly that. Let's go. You know?
That baseline measurement that you can now say, oh, okay,
Yes.
there is some sort of linear equation you can apply. And when you get to that point, you start feeling better about it.
Yeah. And I think, but it's hard, and I think when, taking that leap of faith, I think there's probably the people that are around the table that you're working with. And what we try to do is position ourselves away from net new revenue generation purely. Because what tends to happen in our previous life, that's really where, oh, well, it didn't work out, boom.
Yeah.
Right? And I think in reality, part of digital marketing, and we see this across other industries, insurance being another one that we work a lot with, where when they hear the word digital, what it means to them is I can quote and I can bind my policy online. That's what they think of. They don't think of, well, how do I run better? Yeah, how do I run better campaigns? How do I communicate with my customers? How do I cross-sell, upsell them? I've got 12 people on the phone every day. Could I have some digital tools to support the leads and their ability to do better business on the phone? No. To them, and I don't want that business, because if you're shopping online for auto insurance or whatever, and you're probably somebody that I don't want to talk to, and you're going to, have a bad credit score and all these types of things. So that it's like a rewind in the industry that needs to happen to sort of talk to them and say, no, this isn't about just that. It could be that for you, but it's all these other things that, and if you're willing to go through it like you've been, then you could start to see, well, yeah, okay, and it plays a bit of a role in our customer upsells, and it plays a bit of a role over here, and it also plays a role in driving front-end business. And, our website also needs work, so that can't be just ignored, Throwing a bunch of traffic to a website that doesn't work, that doesn't, as we talk a lot about.
That was a big one.
So I guess the advice would be to sort of look more broadly at your digital stance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think understanding that it's more than just marketing. I mean, we loosely term it digital marketing, but it's, I think I said this early on, it's about customer touch points. It's about customer interaction and giving them ways to reach you that, they're more comfortable with. As I say that, we talk about the phone a lot, but,
I like that point a lot. We've had other podcasts where we've talked about marketing owning more of the sort of end-to-end journey. And it's a bit sort of a catch-all sort of term, I guess, but this idea that marketing and marketing channels and I guess marketing initiatives are touching every aspect of how you would engage someone, an audience, customer, hopefully a new customer, prospect. So that makes sense.
Yeah, I find that's probably the unseen element that once you get into it and start developing these things out, you realize, there's a whole lot more we can do once we have that ability to digitally speak to the customer, for lack of a better phrase.
Yeah, no, that is a good way to look at it. You've already mentioned a few challenges, and looking at things like ROI and leap of faith stuff. I'd also like to say, like, if you had to pick a challenge out of the air, what would you say is a big challenge that comes off the top of your head related to digital and the transformation of the business?
Only because it's top of mind and we just mentioned it, but website development, it just seems like, every time you think you have it sort of envisioned and you start to execute it, the next thing comes up and you go, oh, wow, we really need to be able to do this, and wow, it'd be great if it could do that. And so it seems like it's a constant, I don't want to say battle, but a constant challenge to make that everything you want it to be all the time. I suspect we're not unique in that regard. I think that you're not, and I'd like to
Kevin to talk about the post yesterday or the other day from Brian Walker.
Yeah, so for anyone listening who doesn't know, Brian Walker, he's sort of been a long-time e-commerce thought leader in his days. Well, he worked at like Eddie Bauer and Amazon, but that he really rose to prominence at Forrester, leading a lot of their e-commerce research. Since went to SAP and Accenture, and just a really smart guy. I think he's out of Seattle. He really likes soccer too. MLS. And
Good man.
go to his Twitter. He's like a Sounders super fan. It's funny. So, anyways, he had this really great post though about talking about e-commerce projects being huge deployments, right? Real like bandwidth suck on IT and business planning and business leadership. And so he's kind of saying now it's at the point where these 9-month cycles can't exist, that no one's interested in that. It's really all about agility, adapting to current market shifts, customer demands, things like that, and being able to build business practices around how to address those quicker. And agility is the word he uses several times in the piece, and really hammers at home this idea that you've got to be able to execute and adapt much quicker. And that's the sort of intersection of marketing and IT now, using these tools and websites, whether you're a commerce-driven website or just pure content like a Goose Digital, you still have to be able to address whatever those needs and challenges are very, very quickly. We live in a fast-moving world, and that's happening.
Right?
More
What would
and
you...
more.
Customer expectation changes so quickly. I mean, there's, the bar is constantly being moved. And, if you're...
And the rate of that, or the velocity of that expectation and change, continues to increase.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that when the business comes in, I think he uses this example, and we've talked about this before. Hey, we'd really have a great marketing idea or solution idea, and then you come out of the room and it's like, oh yeah, that's a 5-month, that'll be 4 months, and it's like, and he brings that up.
Yeah.
And one of the quotes that he had, because he talks about his time at Hybris and one of his clients that he now works for an e-commerce systems integrator. Okay, so an e-commerce service company, and I think that's what they are, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So he says one of the big challenges basically is around this agility and the systems that are in place. And he said one of his past clients will never implement a traditional platform like these Magentos or these SAP Hybrises ever again for that reason, because we don't want that type of and so what's happened now, and maybe Chris, you can weigh a bit in on this, is that. And we've talked a bit about this, like a little bit about this over the years, is that the technology that is allowing us to go do what we want to do from a digital perspective is stuck in a paradigm. And without getting into all the gory details of what those things are, it's amounted to IT people that know a certain way. I mean, I was an IT service management. I'm a practitioner level ITIL certified person. I mean, I know that world extremely well. I also know what's extremely broken in it, because it was based in a world where, yeah, you had to be really worried if you were a bank and you were doing something at night, and the next morning you had 500,000 people at Royal Bank, where I was, logging into net action, discount trading, and God forbid it crashed. So you needed to have reams of process and shit all around it. And why? Because the technology sucked. The technology was just not good enough. That's not the case anymore. We're in a world now where that tech stuff is way different.
It's built with agility in mind.
It's got all that in mind, but you've got all these IT organizations that don't get it yet. They're still trying to get there, or in some cases they've dug their heels in, which was why I responded to the post the way I did.
Yeah, or don't have the means, whether it's a process or skill set perspective, or even just sort of like a general culture around moving quicker.
Yes, and I think that's really, really a key is moving quicker. So anyways, I think that's, Chris, I wanted you to weigh in on it because you've got a background in this area.
Well, I think we have too many different sort of types of customers, but some of our customers are like new on the scene. They don't have that sort of legacy,
Which is a huge advantage.
It can be a huge advantage, but they also are not sitting on the trust and loyalty of their customer base. So there's obviously an opportunity to leverage that by strategically going about transformation process, which is obviously what COMDA is going through, is managing their existing customer base through thoughtful, sort of executive leadership and making sure that they're getting the new pieces in place to kind of move the business forward.
So how would you look at when we talk about things like that system layer that needs to be there below the marketing layer? And, some of the things we've talked about in the past, just that when we walk into a client environment that isn't quite prepared to be able to take that on?
Yeah, I think I think the only thing that really we've got is the ability to sort of take a customer's forward-looking strategy and say, here's where we can add value and sort of take you into those areas where you want to be, while sort of maintaining your existing structure to the point where you're looked after.
I think there's something to be said too when we talk about agility and speed. It's not biting off more than you can chew. Like smaller bites, more frequent chews, right? Instead of looking at these massive mammoth projects, it's a multi-year thing. Like we know, continuing to improve in digital is a journey, and it's not going to happen overnight. It's multiple years. But what if we just said, let's just take this one thing and do that really well and see what we learn, and then we'll address the next thing after that, rather than trying to do it all in one shot.
Yeah, or even a website all in one shot.
Yeah, like we talk about that a lot for our own site is, well, what pieces will we just change quickly? We won't do a whole web project.
So I think what we're seeing in the space is that COMDA is certainly not unique, and that there needs to be, I guess where I was kind of trying to go when you pulled out the word, the website development, is that there are these inflection points, or if you want to call them pain points, in the old days of solution selling, what's your pain? But that you need to feel that, and like high enough in the org needs to have some of those challenges where they're like, you know what, yeah, we have tried to do things, and boy, does it ever take forever. Or, man, we've got a new product, and it's not getting into the system fast enough, or it's just for what. And to me, these are things that are, I say this, like I'm very passionate about it, but it's like, to me, they're just completely unacceptable. It's just unacceptable. It's like we need, and why? I mean, I understand why. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not like I'm saying our systems should be able to do it, but it's this mindset where it's like we have to get to a stance where we can just pivot and do things quickly and not be sucked down. And like you said it this morning, oftentimes a year behind everywhere you want to be because a project takes 9 months to do.
Mm-hmm. Do you want me to expand on that really quick?
Sure. Then we'll get Michael's buy-in because he's been listening hard.
I have comments. I always have comments.
Maybe this resonates, maybe it doesn't. But one of the things we saw at our last business at Order Dynamics was he'd spend, 6 to 8 months searching, like a retailer would search for the right technology, the right e-commerce platform. Okay, great. You make a really smart sort of investigative decision. We're going to go with this platform. Great. We're going to build the perfect plan around what this new website looks like and everything to do with it. And then you spend 9 months building that. And by the day that you publish this thing and it goes live, it's already behind, because that actually reflects the thinking in the market and your perceived or your perception of what your customers needed 9 months ago.
Yeah. And if you were lucky enough to get it done in 9 months.
Yeah, if you're actually on time. So you're in a perpetual cycle of being a year behind, basically.
And listen, I will throw this back at the experts in the room. Mm-hmm. How do you overcome that? Because you mentioned a couple of things that I think we've had huge problems with. Platforms, things that, at the time were the best way to go. Mm-hmm. But 2 years later, when you're finally at a point where you feel like you've got it built out the way you want, and now you want to start working with it, it's no longer the best platform. It no longer functions the way the new things are working, and so now you're like, oh my God, do we start from scratch again? Or
there was a period of time that the paradigm really didn't shift. So we're only seeing now over the last maybe 2 years where you can go out and acquire technology that is truly cloud and is truly that next paradigm. You were stuck in a world where we bought XYZ product, but actually all the things that came with it were exactly the same as that other XYZ product that we had 5 years ago, which was the exact same as the 5 years before that, because that took some time to change. So now I think what you need to do, and just to sort of answer the question, is that I think that, first of all, I'm a big believer in timing, and that some things can't be forced, but you have to have sort of that passion and that consistency in the message. So us as a vendor, we push this really hard. Like we want to be saying the right things, but a customer may not be ready to sort of fully digest everything that's being said. But I believe that over time that will be. And when I know that when we met the first time, you talked about, well, I didn't think, we could do much of this without Salesforce CRM, because you had went off to a Salesforce. And I said, well, actually, there's a lot we can do. And they'll want to sell you all the licensing and
The dream, yeah.
And the dream that you can do it all and move a platform for 2 years and then see if you can, but we can actually eke a ton out of here. And I know in the back of my mind that through that process, we're going to get some value for sure. We're going to get some value. And then number two, we'll start to see, the eyes will start to open up around the table. Well, maybe we actually need to think about changing that system or changing that system. So I think that a professional, if you want to call it that you might hire to say, I'm your new digital director. They're going to walk in and they're going to say, I want a budget for a new this, and I want a budget for a new that, and I want to, well, just slow down. And after a year, as we say, they'll get burnt out and they'll move on because I'm a professional in the space. You're not going to give me a new ERP. You're not going to give me a brand new platform.
Give me the tools, the shiny
you're not
tools.
You're not going to give me what I need. I want to try to make a mark here. Like I want to go do it. So that's not the right approach. You can't do that. And that's what I love about family-run businesses is that they have this, this innate protective view of this thing that they have that we're prepared to invest and make it better. But at the same time, like we're not just corporate professionals that I've hired off the street and, that's what you do because that's what the name of the game is right now. So it's that blend of sort of when the timing is right, you go off and you find the right answer. But I'd say the best advice is if somebody walks in and says, you've got to make a whole bunch of wholesale changes and that's the only way you're ever going to get there. It's like, well, that's not the right advice.
I would argue that most companies probably can't afford it, and
so it's extremely high risk.
Yeah, exactly. Talk about leaps of faith.
Yeah.
That's one that you probably there's a very small percentage of businesses that could actually withstand it and come out the other side, where they thought they were going to get to go.
Yeah.
That's a super tough one, and it speaks to that sort of gradual adoption of
Yes.
concepts and ideas, and as you say that eventually the eyes open up to the new things that you see and say, oh, okay, well, now I understand how that works, so it'll work a lot better if we do this. Oh, okay, let's look at doing that. And then if we can get into this space or this platform, then wow, look at all the things we can build out of that. Okay, great. But you sort of have to step a little bit before you run all the way to the finish line.
Yeah.
Which is a challenge in itself.
Yeah.
Well, the analysts are saying, Gartner is saying that 11% of revenue spent on marketing and 29% of that is tech. So the what you need to be, putting your effort into in that marketing side is obviously leaning toward tech. At least that's what the reports are saying. And I think in terms of platform decisions, I think one of the things that we've been, really bullish about is making decisions on the basis of the way that these organizations are investing in their tech. So choose someone who is, demonstrating ongoing commitment by investing in their technology and in what they're doing. That's a big part of what we talk about with our customers.
Sure.
Making those decisions, if they're tech decisions, making them around those organizations that are investing heavily in that area.
Yeah. Interesting. Concept obviously being if they're moving forward, if they're constantly moving forward, then you're with someone you can move forward with. You buy something static, and it is what it is, and it's never going to change. And now you're stuck with something that
That's
didn't
right.
progress, right?
That's right. Yeah, exactly. That was. I think that was pretty good. I don't know what you guys think. What else do we want to throw on the table?
Did we hit all of our points, Michael?
I think we did.
Good.
We sort of hit a little bit on where's COMDA going, but I think it's a good opportunity to wrap up just in terms of hearing a bit from you, Michael. I know I'm extremely excited, and we're very proud to have COMDA.com. We have to remember. It's
There you go, yeah.
COMDA.com.
Thank you, yeah.
COMDA.com. Yeah, we did that.
Now everyone's going to go there.
Yeah, exactly. So, but we are sincerely, very proud to be part of this process. It's exciting because I think there's so much opportunity, but what would you say is in store for COMDA over the next 5 to 10 years?
I think your excitement is shared by me because I think we both see the same thing, that the opportunity is almost limitless. There's some big opportunities out there. There's some very big players in our industry that, I said earlier, they're not doing anything we don't do. Yeah. So, how do you just get up to that level and let everybody else know that hey, there's an alternative to that?
Yes.
And I think that for us is, for me personally, that's where I sit and say, okay, that's where I want to get to. That's the opportunity. Let's focus to how we build to that. The challenge, of course, is you got to do it step by step and make the incremental things along the way. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have to learn from those and not, as you say, abandon them, because it's real easy to abandon ideas if you make a misstep early on.
Sure.
Again, that when you've got a traditional business, you've got a business that's been around for 40 years, 40, 50 years, there are customer expectations that were built up over those 40 or 50 years, and you can't abandon all of that all at once either.
No.
So there's a tightrope you have to walk between going to where you want to get to and not leaving behind the things that got you there in the first place. Awesome. And that's, I think, the challenge in the next short to midterm.
Yeah.
is walking that tightrope and still being on the forward leading curve and now that we've sort of caught up, now how do you get back? How do you get out in front and not, as you say, continually be a year behind everybody else or everything else, right? Yeah.
Were you going to land that, Kev?
I have one kind of broader question. I hope it doesn't drag out another 10 minutes.
No, it's fine.
Sorry.
I'm fine with 10 more minutes. Maybe the listeners aren't. But.
Yeah.
We were talking about this sort of idea this morning, and I think COMDA.com is a really good example of a company that's changed and evolved with the times. And any company that's been around 40 or 50 years has certainly done that. And it's a really good point that you had earlier in the podcast is it's not just the change now. There's been changes along the way. Mm-hmm. It's a really good distinction, but if we look 30 years ago, the business was sort of driven out of catalog and then into phones, and then it's kind of become this thing right now where it's some digital, some quote analog or the older school. And then where do you think it's going in 10 more years, and what percentage of digital that is today do you think will actually be absorbed in 10 years? Do you think COMDA.com is predominantly a digital play in 10 years, supported by traditional methods? Broad questions.
Yeah.
Save the tough one for the last.
You're going to need a crystal ball for that one. I think if you'd asked the same question of a lot of people 10 years ago, they probably wouldn't have given you the answer that ended up being the way it played out for them. Mm-hmm. And listen, there's a lot of things that are unknowns. Not to pontificate too much, but the talk of the death of bricks and mortar and things like that, there may be a backlash to that. It may turn out that people find that I kind of miss the in-store experience, and there's a reversal back to that.
I love that point. In-store is always going to exist. It might change what it looks like.
Sure.
More experiential based, whatever, but I can't see a day where there's no stores anywhere.
Yeah, so when I say, you say, well, is it all digital? No, I don't think it'll ever be. I think there will always be a mix of, again, customer touch points. Different customers want to be reached in different ways. I think the real challenge in the long run is going to be figuring out which methods work for which customers.
Yes.
You said
Mike, you had that before too.
You said a phrase earlier that stuck with me. You said they targeted you on Instagram, and I was equal parts fascinated and horrified by that phrase. It's targeted me on Instagram, really? Yeah. Wow. What were they doing? How did they target me? How did they find me? What kind of target? What were they using?
Yeah.
But for you, that's you were okay with that. I mean, you're an Instagram user, an Instagram personality, if you will, and so you were targetable, and you were okay. You were open to that. Yeah. Some people aren't,
right?
And maybe never will be. And Absolutely. So it's figuring out how to utilize all of these different methodologies to reach the different people in the ways that they want to be reached.
Figuring out how to figure it out.
Yeah.
Well, no, and I think if you have what I think is part of the excitement comes from we have this mix of capabilities within, or COMDA.com has this mix of capabilities in the business. We've got a sales capability, and we've got a really great customer service capability, and we've got our production capability,
growing digital marketing,
and we're gaining a digital marketing capability, and we've got a level of marketing capability. It's things that we understand, and now it's applying those resources. It's why wouldn't we? We've got a great sales capability, or we have a sales capability, however you want it. But why don't we put that to best use? Like, why wouldn't we take that capability and say, that's actually a differentiator? Like, having that out there, that's a powerhouse. But maybe we're not, maybe if we took some digital, which we're doing, some digital angle, and hived off the things that are really great and let those customers, to your point, utilize the channel that they want to utilize.
Right.
But then the people that really do need a phone call and a conversation, you target and you use those resources in the right way, or in a way that would put, I guess the hypothesis is that would kind of be a good use of resource, right?
That's the one that satisfies that particular.
Right.
We've seen this. We've laughed about it before. The customer reviews and two different customers will review the exact same thing in completely different ways. Mm-hmm. One will say, "Oh, loved the online ordering experience. It was simple and fast and easy," and then the other one will be like, "Oh, I wish somebody would just call me and then let me do it that way." It's like,
but it's not even that linear, because like the order of those things might even, or the sequence are different too. Like, it's just like you basically have to have all touch points in good enough shape to address whatever the preference at the time is.
Exactly. Because you're right. The person who ordered online may not want to follow up online. They may want to have a conversation that says, "Hey, where's my order?" Or "Why is this taking so long?" Or I don't know. I'm trying to think things off the top of my head, but
whereas somebody might be more likely to place their order on the phone. They might be more likely to just click on their email and get an order status.
Yeah.
So you better have that in place, or pay their invoice online.
Well, but then things like we've had issues like this where a product is out of stock for a period of time or something. That's a very difficult thing to communicate to a customer digitally. Sure. "Oh, I'm so sorry, your product that you ordered we don't have, and it's not going to be available for 4 weeks. And what would you like to do?" In a phone conversation where you can discuss options and explain why,
or provide more empathy.
Yeah, that it changes the customer perception of that conversation, right, or that interaction. And so again, as you say, you have to be skilled. You have to be very good at all of them.
Yeah.
To really succeed across.
Yeah, it's like you can't afford not to be.
Right.
I mean, the bricks and mortar / e-commerce retailers or brands that we always aspired to and would use as sort of like the examples were, to your point, Michael, the ones that truly embraced kind of all channels equally among their brand and business. So you could walk into give me the one that was a mountaineering company.
Oh, are you talking about Moose Jaw?
Moose Jaw, that's the one. And they'd be an example. You'd walk into a store and, "Oh, you know what? Buy that online if it's more convenient, no problem," or vice versa, or whatever worked for them. And
they
then,
were one of the first to adopt like sort of the reps having iPads in the store.
Yeah,
because they had a total possible inventory of 100,000 SKUs, and of course selling outdoor gear like canoes, you'd need 3 warehouses to even store half of it. So obviously their stores didn't have that. So they'd say, "Okay, well, here's one of the models. Oh, you want, I don't know, the super gray metallic one? Well, we don't have that here. Here's what it looks like. I can make that order right now for you."
Whereas other organizations would frown upon that, right? And we have customers today that are in this boat, right?
Sure.
Oh, no. Like store sales. There's a sales manager for that store. There's reps in the store. And no, we're not trying to send that order online. We're going to try to sell them something else that's there. And to your point, the sort of long-term effect of that is that, well, the customer isn't being sort of serviced in a way that, and for them, they're actually doing themselves a disservice, because actually they could just ship it from the e-commerce warehouse. And if they just sorted out the comp plan internally, the rep would be more than happy to do so.
I was fascinated by Best Buy when they specifically went away from commission sales in their stores. Just
by the way,
went away from it.
What a turnaround for the business.
Oh, exactly. And they they embraced the concept that people are probably not going to go buy a big TV online. They want to go in, they want to look at it, they want to see it, they want to see the picture, but then they're fine to go home and look online to see where the best price for that TV is, and then wait for somebody to ship it to them. And so they said, "Well, we can do all of that."
That leap of faith that we talked about earlier, I think they took one. A lot of retailers who've gotten out in front of digital and now consider digital a strength for themselves say, "I don't think consumers care about these metrics, so we don't either."
Right.
And so now we're changing how we do our business, and it's kind of an unknown because we haven't done this before, and who knows what's going to happen. But we're trying to do right by the experience and what we think consumers are dictating in terms of expectations.
And to your point on placing the phone call, and that maybe that out of stock situation isn't the best thing to do digitally, because you want to have someone on the phone that can pivot them into a product or really clarify, because they're going to have a perception that when they receive that email and they're not going to be able to deal with it, right?
Right.
That you're able to figure out in your business, like, well, yeah, if you're a digital entrance and you're selling promotional products, which we know COMDA.com sells promotional products, and you're a digital entrance, we're setting up shop, and maybe we have an idea how to acquire clients online, like these guys. Well, I don't have a big customer service team. Well, you want me to call someone with an out-of-stock product? That's probably not going to happen. I'm probably going to have to send them an email, right? I'm certainly not going to push someone over the finish line on a renewal basis next year and maybe get them on the phone and ask them how they're doing because they've been cruising the site for a little bit and just a little bump to get their next order. They're not going to do that. They can't.
They don't have the resources.
They don't have the resources, right? So we're in this opportunity. A lot of our great traditional businesses that we work with, they've got these resources.
That infrastructure exists.
Infrastructure
Yeah.
at their fingertips right?
To leverage properly, add that sort of layer that will engage that audience that maybe didn't exist 5 or 10 years ago,
It's an
and just
enhancement
add
layer,
it.
yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good term.
So there's a good wrap-up point right there.
That was a good wrap-up.
It's this ability to leverage all the resources necessary to actually service the customer in whatever manner is most appropriate for that interaction.
Yeah.
And,
Bingo.
Now, we haven't done a Simon Sinek reference on this show. And I feel like, is that just stupid?
a which?
Simon Sinek. Start with.
Well, he's got a lot of smart things to say.
Yeah, he does though, right? Like it's not like we're not being one of those CEOs that's.
No,
like,
I think Brian Walker got the reference today.
Read
There you
this
go.
book. Oh, he did? Okay. So basically, this is a thought leader in next generation leadership. And I'll forward you a couple of the TED Talks.
Okay.
So he talks about a variety of different concepts, from leading the next generation pool of people that are coming into the workforce and how they need to be, right or wrong, need to be kind of led, as well as the most, what's the book you're reading?
Leaders Eat Last.
Leaders Eat Last, another kind of concept of next generation leadership. We're not going to get into all this, but what I think is really interesting as it relates to this conversation is one of the more recent books that he's doing is something called the Infinite Leader, I think it's called. Sorry, Simon, if I blew that up, but it'd be nice if you actually watch this, which I know you don't. But maybe Google has transcription, which Simon Sinek. Simon, if we say it enough times, it'll shoot it over to him.
That's how we're
Probably
targeting
not.
him.
Probably
actually.
not. But this concept, really quick, is that most businesses are in finite. They set themselves up as a finite game. This whole theory is based on this finite game. Is like rules, known objective. Everybody follows the same rule. Baseball. That's a finite game. Whenever we play chess, there's an end. There's a beginning and end, and there's rules. He's like, business isn't a finite game. So the idea that we have fiscal quarter, not so much really maybe in family-run businesses, but we've got our annual thing, and we got to do all this stuff, and well, that's our competition. Well, says who? Do they agree with those rules that they view you as your comp? Maybe not. So he sort of goes on to say that really great businesses are thinking. It talks about the long game. Mm-hmm. Essentially, it's saying that if infinite leaders are playing a game that is not about the end of the year. It's not about next year.
Yeah.
It's about 20 years, right? And we're here to have a company that is going to continue on, and that's going to be this and that and ups and downs along the way. But how do you work through that? So I haven't read the book. It's a brand new thing. I've just been watching some of the podcasts, but I sent a summary of it to you.
Yep.
He uses this one example where he's with sorry, Simon. He's with an Apple. He comes out of a Microsoft conference, talks about how their whole focus is on how to beat Apple, and then he goes to an Apple conference, and they're just all about trying to build the best product. And he manages to be with employee number 10 or something at Apple, and says, I've seen the Microsoft Zune, which was their iPod equivalent,
Right.
and it's 10 times better than your iPod. And the guy from Apple looks over and says, I bet it is. Conversation over. And it was just a moment that he tries to draw this parallel between people that are just focused on connecting with their customer and building their business. They're not worried about end of year. There needs to be a reality check too. Apple's an easy example with 130 billion in the bank account, but I think what we're saying is that a long game is what we're talking about here.
There is a dearth of leadership out there that thinks that way, sadly, and it is to a large extent, I think, driven by that corporate responsibility and reporting and all that stuff.
Taxes.
the free market system is great and all, but some of the things that that are driving it these days have become very rigid, and corporate think has become a real thing that's not necessarily helpful, which is why it's great to not have to conform to that as a family business and be able to think outside those boxes.
absolutely.
Take a bit of that, but then, yeah.
Transforming, yeah.
All right. Well, thank you, Michael. This has been excellent.
The pleasure was mine. I can honestly say that. You guys are
Now,
great.
can we go to comda.com and use Goose 25? Can we
Promo
do that?
code
Promo
Goose-
code
Promo code
Goose 20?
Goose25?
Yeah.
You'd have to tell me. Is it still active?
It's definitely not active.
Okay,
but it
well,
should
you
be.
can have to activate
So we'll activate it. Is that cool? Not to put you on the spot.
I'm totally good
Because
with that.
we have like 1 million viewers.
I
So
am
it could
totally
co-
good with that.
All right.
At all opportunities, let's drive some revenue.
All right. All right. Well, thank you.
All right,
Michael.
guys. Appreciate
Awesome.
that.